I've been beaten down and felt that pain, that humiliation, that hurt, that failure. The question is what do you do with that? Do you look inward? Do you blame the jury? Do you blame the judge? Do you blame the witnesses? Or do you look at yourself and say, what's my role in this?
That's Nick Rowley, renowned trial attorney and the founder of Trial Lawyers for Justice.
If you find a way to accept full responsibility for it, even if your role is only 1%, that is what's going to move you forward. That's going to help you succeed in life, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of CRISP, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. CRISP started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. Today, we're revisiting one of our most popular episodes from the podcast where I sat down with Nick Rowley to discuss why big risks can lead to even bigger rewards, the power of being brutally honest, and why we learn more from our losses than our wins.
No matter what I had gone through growing up, and even as a young lawyer, that hurt, that sucked, whether it was rejection or failure, I would use that as a motivator. Fuck you. I'm going to show you. Nothing's going to keep me down. If you can't kill me, you're never going to be able to stop me.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. Nick Rowley is considered by many to be one of the most accomplished trial lawyers of his generation, having won more than $1.5 billion in verdicts and settlements for injury victims and families across the country. His dedication to teaching attorneys and his philanthropic work have earned him countless awards and recognition. But Nick's journey to becoming who he is today was one of hardship and adversity. In fact, he describes his younger self as a juvenile delinquent.
I always got in trouble. I never fit within the realms of the institutions that I was put in, growing up. Even during law school, I really didn't, fit in, and I didn't like the institution of it. And I spoke out against the law professors and things that I thought were going wrong within the school. I represented a number of students in a case because they could have a student representative in a discipline case that the school was bringing against them for plagiarism. And I thought it was unfair. And so I wrote what I thought about it, wrote kind of a manifesto and what I thought of the school and what I thought they were doing, and how wrong it was. Put that in everybody's, inbox. This is before you really did things by email. You'd slide it into their inbox, and made my case and helped a bunch of them out. Kept them from getting expelled. But I have never fit in any institution. It hasn't worked for me. I got expelled from every school from 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, all the way through 11th grade. And I graduated from a school for delinquents. And then I went into the military. And in the military, you have no choice but to really fit within that institution. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the structure of it. And I enjoyed the challenge. And then it was through the military that I went to college and then law school.
I'm curious, so I can understand what drove you to joining the military. And from what I read, you initially wanted to kill bad guys, but you ended up becoming a medic. How did that happen?
I was one of 3 out of 76 that qualified to train and become a pararescueman, which is the Special Forces unit within the United States Air Force. And then as I went forward with that, I turned out to be colorblind. And so that disqualified me from military freefall school. So the other thing that pararescuemen are is they're medics. So I ended up just going and doing the medic training, and then went through some of that pipeline actually over the time that I was in the military and became a medic. Learned how to save people instead of killing people.
And then how did it go from the military to your decision to go to law school?
I was actually doing a survival training with the United States Army one summer. And as I was doing this training, one of my, fellow soldiers, him and I were talking. We were both on fire guard duty, where you have to stay up all night and, make sure nobody, comes into your little makeshift, camp. So we're on fire guard duty and we're talking. He goes, what are you going to do, this next year? I said, I'm going to finish my master's in sociology that I was working on. I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm going to go to law school. I said, yeah, I want to go to law school one of these days. Lawyer Jerry Spence from Wyoming, he represented Randy Weaver, who's from my hometown in Iowa, and I really like the way that he stood up against the government and, and how he stands up for people. I've read a bunch of his books. So someday I'd like to go to law school. I just, have to go back and do my pre-law. And Mike Myers, looked at me and goes, pre-law? I said, yeah, don't you have a pre-law degree? And he says, there's no such thing as a pre-law degree. You can get a poli-sci degree. You could have a degree in basket weaving and go to law school. You just got to take the LSAT. I go, oh, the LSAT, what's the LSAT? We finished that block of training and he met up with me and he brought me the form. You didn't do things online back then. He actually brought me the piece of paper to fill out and send in to take the LSAT. So I did that and started law school that fall.
And I'm curious, as you started law school, even when you graduated from law school, did this feel like a natural fit for you? Like you're born to do this, or was that not the case?
No, not one bit. You show up, law school isn't like college. You show up, you think, you show up your first day of class, they're going to, give you a little intro, going to tell you what to look forward to for the rest of the semester, give you an assignment. Law school, you show up and you're already supposed to have read 1,000 pages. And so I show up for my first class and then professor comes in, looks around and calls on somebody to brief a case. Person stands up and starts briefing a case. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Like, what's going on? Fortunately, I didn't get called on. I think one person did and wasn't prepared, and that person got chastised. I'm like, what is this? This is messed up. Pulled somebody aside. I said, what's the deal? Was there like an assignment? And they said, yeah, they put out the assignments, a few weeks ago. And so I went and I looked at all these assignments. I'm like, oh my God, I'm already behind. Yeah, it was not what I expected it would be. I guess I had no idea what it would be like. I have no lawyers in my family, and I was the second to get a college degree and then the, first to get a graduate degree. I had nobody to show me the way or give me, any clue as to what law school would be like, what it would look like. So I went in unprepared. I was still in the military at the time. I was doing a lot of mixed martial arts stuff, fighting in the undercircuit of the MMA, doing, fights on Saturdays in an octagon in San Pedro and other places. And here I am going to law school. I almost failed out my first year, barely passed by the skin of my teeth. It was like a 2.0. Anything less would have been academic probation. Most people that end up on academic probation don't end up finishing law school. So that was my first year. And then the second year, I had figured it out. And I went to school during the summer. And the school I went to was a school called University of Laverne. It was a Cal Bar accredited school. It wasn't accredited by the American Bar Association, the ABA. I had no idea what the ABA was when I started law school. I was 20 years old. I had been accepted at some ABA schools, but I had no idea. I was like, I'm going to go out to school on the West Coast because I was sick of the cold, Midwest that I'd lived in my entire life or most of my life. After, that first semester, I found out I, wasn't going to an ABA school. So I wasn't going to be able to go back to the Midwest to practice law. I was really upset about it. What am I going to do? And I got certified as a certified law student my second year of law school. And the firm I was clerking at had a number of medical negligence cases. And since I was a medic, they gave me these files. They said, what do you think? Fast forward, 6 to 8 months, and I'm already in the courtroom making appearances and doing my first trials as a law student, which was a pretty neat experience that I don't think I would have gotten in any other state. By the time I finished law school, I was, amjuring getting the highest grades in more than half of my classes. I had figured it out. I cracked the nut. I knew that I had to pass the bar exam on the first attempt because I wouldn't be able to afford to take it on the second attempt. I'd lived on my own since I was, a teenager, and I had no financial support whatsoever from family or anyone else to, get me through law school or get me through the bar exam. So I fell behind on my mortgage. My credit was shot. Did everything I had to do to focus on the bar exam, let the bills pile up, and didn't work, just focused on passing that exam. And I did. And then when I, got my bar results, I swore in and I started trying cases. I hit the ground running. My motto was, I'll try any case anywhere against anyone. You just, show me where the trial is, if it's in front of a jury.
And with that motto, I imagine came a lot of experience. So clearly you have a lot of wins throughout your career, but I've also read that you have, more than a dozen trials that you've lost throughout your career. And you've stated that you've learned a lot more from the losses than you have from the wins. So was there a particular case that you just felt that you got this case locked in, but then the outcome, of course, was the exact opposite of what you hoped for?
There's a medical negligence case that I tried, and I've tried 168 cases. I have 14 cases that I consider losses. I think 9 of those are actual defense verdicts. There are 5 of them that I consider a loss. I could say, oh, look, it was a multi-million-dollar verdict, but the truth is it's a loss because I was offered more money than what I won at trial. And so I'm transparent about those things. I've been beaten down and felt that pain, that humiliation, that hurt, that failure. The question is what do you do with that? Do you look inward? Do you blame the jury? Do you blame the judge? Do you blame the witnesses? Or do you look at yourself and say, what's my role in this? I have this rule that if something goes bad, if you find a way to accept full responsibility for it, even if your role is only 1%, which is tough to do sometimes, that is what's going to move you forward. That's going to make you better. That's going to help you succeed in life, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. If you're walking down, the alley and somebody, jumps out and, puts a gun to your face and the other guy comes up and shanks you in the side, I mean, maybe you can't really take responsibility for that. Or maybe you could say, shit, I should have been walking down in that alley. And how can we learn from it? No matter how bad it is or how traumatic it is, it doesn't mean excusing everybody else and everything else in the universe that went wrong, but focusing on everybody else and being in the victim role accomplishes nothing other than making things worse and preventing you from moving forward.
I'm curious, with what you just said, were you always that way, or was there an experience that helped to shape you into that evolved version of Nick Rowley? Was it in the military? Was it in your childhood or upbringing? I'm just curious kind of where that came from.
We moved from Iowa. I was born and lived on a farm during my first years of life. And then there was a big change in the agricultural and livestock industry in the Midwest back in the late 70s, early 80s. My dad lost his job. He worked as a farmhand and worked at a meatpacking plant. And he lost his job because that, plant shut down with this crash that was going on. And so we moved to Iowa City and he went to college. He became a teacher. His first teaching job was Nogales, Arizona. So at the age of 7, we moved to a border town, Arizona and Mexico. I was the only white kid in my class. I was one of maybe 3 or 4 in my school. And I got to learn about racism on the receiving end of it. I had the pulp beat out of me 3-4 days a week. I mean, beat up. I'd come home bloody. And it went on for a couple of years, and even after I got to the point to where I would fight back with everything that I possibly had, and I learned how to be a scrapper, I'd still get beat up. Those were formative years for me, and I became a fighter. And no matter how hard I was hit or how bad I was knocked down and beaten, I would get back up with more energy and more rage than I had before. And that became the catalyst really for succeeding in life. And no matter what I had gone through growing up, and even as a young lawyer, that hurt, that sucked, whether it was rejection or failure, whatever it was, I would use that as a motivator and it would just piss me off. And I'd use that to, work even harder. Fuck you. I'm going to show you. Nothing's going to keep me down. There's nothing you can do to stop me. You could kill me. That's the only thing you can do. So if you can't kill me, you're never going to be able to stop me. That was my motto. And then after, I'd say 10 years of practicing law, I started to really look at the success I had had and question, well, I've been successful. Could I be even more successful by taking a different approach, by not being so aggressive? Really shifting that anger to love. And that's really been my project over, the second half of my career as a lawyer, is to, look inward when something, doesn't go right and accept responsibility for it rather than being pissed off about it. A lot of that has to do with how I want my children to grow up and how I want them to handle adversity. Not everybody can handle it the way that I did. People that do handle it that way might end up behind bars. I was, a real hothead for quite a while, and a dangerous one at that. I'm very thankful to be where I am, with the temper and the skill set that I formed over the years and the things that I'm, capable of doing. I'll give you an example. First few years of practice, I'm in court on a case, and this lawyer was just rude, just awful, and raising his voice, acting like a real tough guy. And we finished the hearing, whatever it is. We're, getting ready for a jury trial, and we have words. I go into the elevator, I'm going down to the first floor. He gets in the elevator with me, and he comes up and he steps up to me, gets in my face, and starts running his mouth. Within a split second, I grab that guy by the throat and, put him down on his knees. And I'm lucky that, I didn't get in major trouble for that. He stepped up to me. And my experience in life was, if someone's getting that close to you, you need to take control of the situation. By the time I, had him by the throat, he was a whole different person, and then he was the victim. And I can't believe you did that, I said, "Oh, what's up, pal? You're a tough guy. All right, tough guy. All right, don't step up to a person like that if and get in their personal space. As far as I was concerned, you're gonna take a swing at me." Now, how do I handle a situation like that? Fast forward 10 years, I'm in a jury trial up in Bakersfield, California, and there's a lawyer by the name of Chuck Custer. I've never dealt with a person like that. In my entire career, such a loud mouth. Hit him for a $31.6 million record-setting verdict. But throughout the whole trial, the guy would just run his mouth and say stuff to me. And, it's getting really close to, I'm gonna knock that guy out. I'm gonna, meet me out in the parking lot or out on a country road or something. We can figure this thing out. But instead, he made a comment about my suit. I don't know, didn't like the suit I was wearing or my tie. So every day I just walk up to Chuck and say, "Hey, Chuck, how does this outfit look? Do you like this one?" Kind of like, the Dr. Seuss book, "Do you like my hat?" I'd say, I put this one on for you today. And the more hot-headed he'd get, just the nicer and calmer I'd get. And I've learned how to deal with things that way instead of, the aggressive way. Or just understanding that, a lawyer like that is probably really scared. He's really scared that he's going to get hit with the big verdict and then have the insurance company show up and take all of his files. Yeah, that's scary. He's a human being. He's got a family and mouths to feed, and he's got an ego and, a reputation. He's not happy that the insurance companies put him here and, where he has to try this case and take a big hit. So he's angry about it, and he wants to take that anger out on me. I understand that. I'm not going to let that make me angry. There's so much more power in that than, responding with anger and rage. But it took me years to learn that. You asked about, lessons that I've learned, and there is one trial that sticks out in my mind, and it's a med mal case that I should have won. And in fact, the jury came back and answered question number 1, yes, which was the doctor negligent? And then it was a no on causation. I know I lost that case because I was so pissed off at the defendant physician, and I lost my cool in trial. I went after that guy. By the time I was done cross-examining him, I mean, there was blood all over the courtroom. I'd beheaded him. I was holding his head and showing his head, his, flailing body. And it was brutal. And I looked over at the jury and and they were just like in shock. I lost my connection with the jury. I lost my credibility. There's a case, I hadn't lost a trial in over 8 years, and I tried a med mal case in a place where, people said you could never win a med mal case, and I did not win. The jury was out for 11 hours. We got defense. And I look back and I've watched the footage on CBN, and I know exactly where I failed and where I could have won that case and where I lost it. At least that's my belief. That's what I'm putting it on me. And it was, getting into it with the doctor again. The judge wouldn't make him answer any questions. I lost my cool. And there were a couple other things in that trial, so I beat myself up about that for months. Or I could just say, it's Kalispell, Montana. No one's ever won a med mal case up there. It was a tough case. Causation was tough. The doctors were really likable. It was a tough jury. They're the major employer in town. In fact, the largest employer is who I'm suing. Every one of the jurors was a patient of the defendants, I could come up with all these excuses, but that doesn't fly because I've won that case over and over and over again throughout my career by not making the mistakes that I made in this trial.
To continue, I want to kind of go on the opposite, because I heard you talk about a trial that you were particularly proud of. And when I heard about this, it sounded like something straight out of a movie. If this is already like a script that they're shopping around, it probably should be. I'd love for our listeners to hear about the case you tried against Costco in Santa Monica.
Oh boy. There was a lawyer, in my firm who had a breakdown, and it was emotional. It had to do with substance. And I got a call on Sunday night from that lawyer who I love, who's family to me, and said, I can't do this trial. What are you talking about? I said, well, and he told me what was going on. All right, meet me at the courthouse. I'll be there in the morning. We'll get this case continued. And this man was emaciated. It looked like he had just spent 2 weeks in a crack house not eating. He had not. That wasn't the issue. He was addicted to Adderall. Had been on Adderall during law school and now had gone like 4 or 5 days without sleep, was actually hallucinating, and it was really bad. So he had to go into detox, but he was addicted to Adderall, which is methamphetamine. That's what it is. And I'd never seen anything like it. So we chatted for a minute in person, and I said, you need to leave. You need to get out of here. And we got him into sober living that day, into detox and sober living. But I didn't want him to be there and have that on the record is the reason for the continuance, because that would just be really bad. It would be bad for his career. He'd end up in trouble with the state bar. So I said, just get out of here, and I'm going to tell the judge that we need a continuance, that you're not available, that there are some health issues, which is true, and that you're actually being admitted. I'm going to be very, very general, very vague. So I pulled the defense lawyer aside and I said, listen, so-and-so is having some major problems. So he's not going to be able to try the case. And I'm here, but I don't know the file. So could do me a solid here. Let's step and continue the trial, pick a new date. And Costco's lawyer looked at me and he kind of smiled. He said, well, jury's being called in. We did motions in limine last Friday. As far as I'm concerned, we're going to trial. But if you want to dismiss the case for a waiver of costs, maybe I can, talk Costco into that and not, going against your client to seek costs, for this frivolous lawsuit that she's brought. At that point, now the version of me that has got me to where I am, kicked in. And I thought about it, and the jury consultant was there. I pulled him aside and said, hey, tell me about this case. Give me the scoop. Told me about the case. I said, all right. I found out what the witnesses were. Talked to the client, met her for the first time that morning, and just asked her some questions. And I said, so-and-so isn't available to try your case. They're not willing to continue it. I don't know what the judge is going to do, but I can try the case. I might lose, but I'll do it. She goes, yeah, I want you to try the case. I know who you are. And I truly didn't think I was going to win the case, but I went up to the defense lawyer. I said, listen, can we continue this? I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to say, please, can we please? And I don't ask people for things very often. It's very rare that I say, will you please do this for me? He looks at me, goes, waiver of costs. I said, okay. And he knew a little bit of what was going on with the lawyer. And so he goes, well, I'm going to bring that up to the judge and put it on the record. So I looked at him, I said, all right, pal, and we're going to have ourselves a jury trial. Called in the jury and introduced myself to the judge and did a mini opening statement. And I told the jury, I said, listen, the damages in this case are more than $1 million. It's the injuries are very, very serious. But before we get there, we have to prove that Costco is at fault. And one of three things is going to happen. First thing that might happen is, we put on our case, Costco puts on their case. You come back and you say, there's no case here. Costco didn't do anything wrong. This lady, she's overweight and she wasn't paying attention. She stepped off the curb. She fell. She injured herself through her own negligence. This is a lawsuit that, shouldn't even be brought. And if that's the case, then she ends up with zero. Other thing that might happen is you listen to the evidence from both sides. You say, this is a case of shared responsibility. She should have been paying better attention, taking better care of herself. She's at fault. But also, Costco's at fault too. Costco bears some responsibility here and should be held responsible for contributing to these injuries because Costco was negligent and there was a dangerous condition, on its property. The way this was designed, the way this curb was built. The third thing that might happen, and I believe the evidence is going to show it's either number 2 or number 3. The third thing is that you listen to all the evidence. You see that Costco is not accepting any responsibility whatsoever. And Costco was negligent. Costco was negligent. Costco's at fault 100% for injuring this woman and changing her life. But whichever one, you decide, the damages are worth more than $1 million. But we have to get there first. That was pretty much my mini opening statement, and my jury selection was, we've got, an all-white jury here, and I've got a large, overweight black woman. Would anyone here, if the roles were reversed, be a bit afraid if you were her? I said, yeah. So we started talking about that. At the end of it, our jury selection wasn't very long. I said, well, we all promised to value her case the same way you would if she was a white woman and a school teacher. They all did. And then we tried the case, and I tried it in a day and a half, and the verdict was $1.8 million, 100% on Costco. And they paid it. That's a case I'm pretty proud of because it's one that the verdict wouldn't have been anywhere near that. And I was able to come in and take my skill set that I developed over the years for this woman who was badly hurt, and it was Costco's fault, and it was a zero offer case. And then they offered zero after trial and tried to get a new trial. The judge didn't give it to him. They had to pay every penny. That money changed her life. So it's not one of my 8-figure verdicts or $100+ million verdicts. That it's a $1.8 million verdict that was really awesome. Oh, and I completely waived medical bills too.
So Nick, I'm curious, after a case like that, I imagine that builds confidence, but it could also potentially build ego. Like how do you stay grounded after, an experience like that and other trials?
Well, keep trying tough cases and get your ass kicked every once in a while. That'll keep the ego in check. But when you try a lot of tough cases that people say are unwinnable and you keep winning them, it can get to you. And I've got carried away with myself before and figured I can, pull another rabbit out of the hat. And, it turns out that I don't. And you have to really, look at yourself, say, okay, well, should I have tried that case? Should I have tried it differently? Or was I just too cocky? And I've been too cocky before. It's always a struggle, something that I work on.
So when it comes to preparing for trial, I've read that you said that you have to have this drive where the case is the most important thing to you in the world at the time, and have almost this level of obsession where you're dreaming about the case, you're preparing while you're sleeping. What do you believe the best trial lawyers have in common when it comes to their preparation?
There's a chord that we have within us that is vibrating all the time, kind of like a piano. If you're on one end and I'm a piano, I mean, it's the same vibration. And that vibration is this inability to put up with injustice. There's injustice out there. People are being treated wrong. That people in their cases, they're being, treated cheap or devalued. And it's just vibrating inside of you. Like there's a fire that's always there, and it's not just a pilot light. I mean, it's burning. It's burning. And this drive that we have to go out and make things right. I think of Rick Friedman. I think of, Brian Panish, Gary Dordick, Arash Hamanpour, Keith Mitnick, Randy McGinn. I mean, so many of the lawyers out there that I could go on and on, Carney Shigarian, that they are not willing to stand by and let injustice continue. It's a feeling, it's a belief, it's in your cells, it kind of gets in your DNA. That's what the best lawyers have in common.
On the converse of this, so I've heard you be pretty outspoken about this in the sense of like perhaps commonalities of those who are unsuccessful. And, quoting you, you've said that you don't see real trial lawyers going out drinking at sporting events all the time. They're staying late and working. They don't cut corners. They do whatever it takes. What are your thoughts on that? And I get it, especially in the legal profession, many are struggling with anxiety and stress and depression. People are carrying a heavy load, which creates, a prevalence of drinking perhaps and so on. But you're very, big on just taking care of yourself and just overall mental and physical health.
Our body is our temple, right? And when we're in trial, we're not going to think as sharply and, show up and be able to really be fully in tune with what's going on in the courtroom if we poisoned our body the night before. If we're eating unhealthy, at least that's my experience. This is an unhealthy profession that we're in. The lawyers that I know who've been most successful are very healthy and very healthy during trial. If I am eating unhealthy, which I really don't do much of, when I'm in trial, that's the opportunity to get on track. If I'm not exercising as much as I should have in trial, that's the opportunity to get back into a regimen.
So I noticed the Whoop.
Yeah.
There you go. So I noticed that. We've had their CEO on the podcast as well. What are some of the things that you do? I mean, just in terms of just to keep you in peak state. I read that you're meditating, you're going to bed early. I heard as early as 8 or 8:30. What are some of the habits that you've built that have helped keep you sharp?
Wake up at 4 a.m. Sometimes I don't, but I'm always up by like 5 or 5:30, but I prefer to wake up at 4 a.m. when I'm in trial. I'm certainly waking up that early. I'm going to bed early, making sure that I don't eat 3 hours before bedtime. When I wake up in the morning, I already have something planned to put into my belly. I have my meals planned when I'm in trial. And sometimes I go to some god-awful places to try cases, and it's like, shit, I can't eat at the diner every day. There's a place called Sakara, Sakara, where you can order your food. You can have it pre-made and just make sure that your meals are planned because food is fuel. You get up in the morning to do work on the case. I meditate, maybe yoga, and then I'll work out, and then I go to court. At the end of the court day, I might do a little bit of work or a little bit of, prep for the next day. But the biggest prep, you should know your case by then. You should know your case by the time you're in trial. It's a bad practice to get done with court and then stay up till 11 p.m. preparing for the next day. It's not good for you. And you don't need to unless you've, cut corners in other places.
There's a particular phrase that's often attributed to you. It's called being brutally honest. How did you come up with that? And how do you differentiate between brutal honesty and being brutally honest? Because there's two different things.
Being brutally honest is a way of life, I suppose. Brutal honesty is really the method by which to get jurors to really open up. A lot of judges, across the country use it now. And even defense lawyers, they mess it up, but they try. God bless him. And I'm talking insurance defense lawyers. But I came up with that. I think it would have been the year 2005. I think it was 2005. I was back at Jerry Spence's ranch. I got to spend a lot of time with him, one-on-one time. Was really mentored by him during the first, 5, 7 years, 10 years of my practice. It was really instrumental in my life. I was out at his ranch as one of the graduate courses. It was before I started teaching there. And I was up, practicing jury selection. And we had a set of mock jurors there, and someone, playing the role of a juror said something to me about, oh, you don't want to know how I feel, and you don't want to know what I really think. And I said, oh, I do. I want you to be honest. Really? How honest do you want me to be? I said, I want you to be brutally honest. And the mock juror, the lawyer playing the role as the juror, when I said, I want you to be brutally honest, something changed. Like that, there was a shift in that person's body. There was a shift. I saw it. And then he said, well, here's what I think. I think that you lawyers, are just out to make money, and you bring these frivolous lawsuits, and you just railed on me. I said, wow, thanks for being brutally honest. That hurts. Hope I could convince you that that's not true. But a lot of folks feel that way. Who else? Got everybody talking about it. And it was really in that practice session, which I think, if anyone wants to take something away from this podcast, is you got to practice, set up mock juries, do focus groups. There are a lot of ways to get experience and to figure things out. Set up a laboratory with people and try things out, and you're going to learn things. But it was at that point I thought, brutal honesty, and I wrote it down. I was actually starting to write notes down for the book Trial by Human. And brutal honesty. Okay. And so I started practicing that and seeing how can I get people to really be brutally honest. And now brutal honesty is something you hear all over the place, not just in the law. It's taken off. Something I think I played a part in. I never heard brutal honesty before I put it out there. It changes the way that people communicate and speak to one another. And when you ask jurors or anybody for brutal honesty and you give them permission, you're telling them that you trust them. That in and of itself forms connection. Because if I trust you, you're going to start trusting me. It's just part of, it's the way we work as human beings. It's really making yourself vulnerable, giving, these strangers, these people who have doubts and who have the right to feel however they feel and to think whatever they think and to have whatever opinions that they have, especially now in, this current environment. People are so opinionated and they're on opposite sides of things, and nobody's willing to listen to another person. When you take brutal honesty and you bring that into the courtroom, people let down their guard and they start listening to each other and caring about one another. And then connections start to form and everything becomes possible. And when you have a witness on the stand, expert witness, cross-examine them, because everybody's agreed to be brutally honest here. And you got a defense expert up there and he's just full of shit and he's going on and on and on. Just say, doctor, or Mr. So-and-so, what you just said, let me just repeat it back. You looked over at the jury, you looked them in the eye, and you said, and you repeat back what they said. Were you being brutally honest? The jurors all look like, huh? You weren't, were you? And you can win the case right there. But you better make sure that you follow that code throughout the trial. And don't come across as a shyster. Something isn't good in your case. If there's a bad fact or something goes wrong or you don't do something right, own it. Be vulnerable. Talk about it. Try to put it into context or just fall on the sword. People are forgiven. But the mistake we make as lawyers is something goes wrong and then we try to patch it up and, put some sprinkles on the big piece of steaming shit and say, that's not really a piece of shit. Look at the sprinkles. Look at the frosting on there. Right? And now you've lost your credibility. I'm just saying, oh my God, this is a turd. This really sucks. But let's set that down, and sorry about that. Wish it wasn't there. And everyone goes, okay, yeah, that's true.
Do you ever look back, just curious, like, to your early days as you described as kind of a delinquent, right? Like that 4th grade, 5th grade, all the way through 11th grade. And could you have ever predicted that you would make the evolution that you've now made? Because today, I know you talk about this in your book, Trial by Human, and the importance of just empathy and understanding your clients and really spending time with them and this level of vulnerability. And Randy McGinn, when she was on the podcast, she spoke about the importance of vulnerability and authenticity. But it seems like things have almost gone full circle, and it's this level of evolution to whether, I don't know if it's the fact that you've been tamed or perhaps this is even more of a strength over the years. But do you ever kind of reflect on that, of how much you've evolved?
There's a lot more strength in the way that I approach things now. And also, I don't need to come at things the way that I used to. I now have a reputation, right? When I go into a courtroom, the judges have looked me up. They know who I am. I'm more comfortable with who I am. I have more confidence. Brutal honesty, the way that I was, the undercurrent of that was a lot of fear. And so I would take that and say, oh no, I'm going to be fearless. I refuse to be afraid. I refuse to be insecure. So I'm just going to, ramp it up. That's a way of coping, I suppose, with lack of self-esteem or insecurity. The bully who's out there, like, I was never a bully, but, you trying to show everybody that I'm not the 7-8-year-old that you can beat up every day. I'm not that kid. But the truth is I am, right? We're all, who we become, we're still, the parts that pre-existed. So maybe that was a protector version of me protecting that little boy. And would I have ever envisioned the evolution of me? No. But I have hope that I'm going to evolve much, much more over the next, 25, 30 years of practicing.
And are there specific areas, like, today, we're all a work in progress, but are there areas right now where you're working on them and you feel like you have areas to improve, whether it's professionally, personally, what have you? Like, what are you working on today?
Recently, I've been doing some pretty intensive psychotherapy, working with ketamine. It's like a lozenge, and you let it dissolve in your mouth over 10 or 15 minutes. It's prescribed. It's through a pharmacy. It's all professional. And then you do an hour and a half, 2 hours of therapy. And I've been, going through stuff from my childhood and, issues with my parents and issues with growing up and the things that I experienced, the PTSD that I've lived with and struggled with over most of my adult life because of the death and the stuff that I saw firsthand, when I was a medic. It didn't rattle me then, but it rattled me later on in life to where, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with, dripping sweat and, night terrors because stuff that my 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old brain experienced while my frontal lobes were developing. That being trusting, trusting. I'm very trusting, but I trust but verify. And it's easy to trust you with say $50,000, right? It's like, okay, I'll trust you with money. But to trust you with my vulnerability or my well-being emotionally and to open up and really, let you in, whether that's, being a father or with my wife, Courtney, I'm very protective. I'm always on guard, right? So if something goes wrong, if something isn't right, or there's an argument, I just shut down. The wall goes right up. So I'm protecting myself. And I've been a person that can be loving and engage in the most loving, affectionate, wonderful person. And then something goes wrong and I can just shut right off. I'm trying to work on that. And where does that come from? And that comes from the experiences I had in childhood. I spent 4 months in a juvenile detention center when I was a kid too. I mean, I was for violence. I went through a lot of stuff in my childhood that helped me become who I am, but things that I haven't really, dealt with. And by working on myself and becoming the best person, the best husband and father that I can possibly be, I will then in turn become an even more capable and accomplished trial lawyer.
And thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's from the outside and looking in, I think there's a lot of people who've been listening to this podcast that think about Nick Rowley, 1.5 billion plus in verdicts, beautiful family, everything is good. I want that. And I'm curious, with these large verdicts and, obviously the financial gain that came from that, did that solve any problems for you? I mean, I imagine it probably improved a few things, like you didn't have to worry about being homeless and you could take care of your family, but did that actually end up solving or changing the way in which you operate?
Well, it's, allowed me to, start building schools in Africa and doing a bunch of, really cool things in the world to help people and make the world better. The money's done that. The money's given me the security, the ability to make sure that I can provide for my family. That feels good. I know if there's someone, in my, large array of people that are in my life ended up with some, crazy, weird, disease or cancer, and the only possible cure is, something in, some, medical institution in Finland, and it's $1 million to go get that chemotherapy or that specific thing, that they're going to be able to go because of the money that I've earned. But if it was all gone tomorrow, I had my ranch here in Montana, and I could have a greenhouse and, feed everybody. I'd be just fine. I don't need all private jets and all the other stuff. Those are just vehicles to get me to places to do what I believe is good work to make the world a better place, which is sometimes exhausting. There are times where I say, you know what, take it all down, tear it all down, and just go for walks, with my dogs and kids every day.
How do you keep the fire burning? I mean, I imagine there come points where you're just like, I just want to spend time with my family. I think I've done enough good. Maybe I could just do this for the rest of the time and just be a great dad. And yet it seems, it's the same thing came up when they were speaking with Brian Panish and so many others. It was long since it was about the money. Is it just the human being that you are, or is there something else that keeps you going?
I see a lot in the world that needs to change, and the cases that I've handled, having that ability to save a person's life or to save a family or to take something, this catastrophe that's ruined a family, and to bring it back together and help get everything, take the broken pieces and put them back together and help people move forward, which has a generational impact. And doing that over and over and over and over again and seeing the impact that has gives me the motivation to keep doing it, because a lot of those cases, most of them, I look at, if it wasn't me, it wouldn't have happened. I believe in God. I believe in the universe. I believe in Buddha. And, I'm a spiritual person. I grew up religious. I believe that the universe has put me here. And I look at all the different things I've been through in life and where I am now. I've been put here for a reason. I have a role in this life. I hope I have more lifetimes, and I hope it's as a human being. And I hope that there's reincarnation or something. I don't want to float around in a, golden hall and, sing and, toot a trumpet. That's not my idea of a good time. But in this life, I need to do my work. That's why I'm here. And by doing that work, that makes me a good father. That makes me a good husband. And I'm setting a good example, I hope. I am not the dad that goes to all the soccer games or other events. It's not who I am. And so what I do is I do other things with my kids. And when I'm with them, I am with them. I'm not a, 9 to 5, parent, but I do things, like take my kids to Africa for a month, and we lived in Costa Rica for months at a time. And we do things that are very different. I wish I had more time to do that. And that's what I'm working on. But I think I have another 5 years of pretty intense work I was planning on slowing down by 45, but COVID and it, messed up my plans. Need to work hard for a couple more years. And then in terms of where I'm going next in my career, I'm breaking into doing toxic torts. I have Rick Friedman, who he's one of the best, if not the best trial lawyers in the country. But Rick called me and said, Nick, I've been trying these cases against Monsanto, and I want to bring you and Courtney in to handle the damages. It's a 2-month trial. This is January, February of next year. And then if you like these cases, then I'll have more of them for you. There's like an unlimited number of these cases against Monsanto. So I went out and I saw his closing argument. And, wow, this toxic tort stuff this intrigues me. That fire is going because I'm going to be able to learn something new. He called me after that verdict and said, hey, will you do the August, September trial with me? I said, yeah, absolutely. So I've got Rick Friedman asking me and Courtney to, try a case with him and his partners. Talk about a career highlight. Like, okay, I've made it now. This is the point to be given the opportunity. So I'm super excited about that and learning more and more about these toxic tort cases and these horrible companies that have been, poisoning our environments and the shit that we have in our bodies because of these awful things that these big companies have done. I'm fired up about breaking into toxic torts.
And Nick, as we come to a close, this being the Game Changing Attorney podcast, what does being a game changer mean to you?
Always breaking the mold. The world, society, our profession, they put us in these molds and we put ourselves in these molds, don't we? And this is what we're supposed to be. And this is okay. Now I finally got to this. Now I've molded things perfectly and I'm me as a trial lawyer. I know I can go in and win and succeed and do what I do. You gotta continuously break the mold.
I hope you enjoyed revisiting this episode of the Game Changing Attorney podcast with our guest, Nick Rowley, and have gained new insights from our timeless conversation. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at GameChangingAttorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691 and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on our interview with Nick Rowley, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.